Oi, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome to the stream. How are we doing out there? Without further ado, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of Less Than 3. This is a mental health podcast focusing on gaming, streaming, and, of course, mental health. Remember that to support the show, you can subscribe to the channel and throw bits, but you may also head on over to patreon.com/gooperatives, where for only $1, you can get access to the audio and video versions of this episode early before it goes live on youtube.com and podcast services around the globe the following week for free. This week, for the pilot, we are discussing how to discuss mental health on Twitch / how to advocate. We are also blessed, I would say, with two amazing guests for this episode, both JessyQuil and KaitiePlays. Let me unmute these two. How are you guys doing? Would you like to introduce yourselves?
My goodness, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Jessy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Hello, my name is JessyQuil. I am a casual variety caster who focuses on discussing mental health and psychology and self-care while I play games or do creative art creations on cast. My certification, my university degree is in psychology, and I am also mental health first aid certified. But during the day, I work as an IT administrator. So those are the things that I do. I also have a blog, a Twitch collection of highlights, and a YouTube playlist, which showcases the mental health and self-care tips and strategies that I've talked about over the years on my broadcast. And it's something that I've been doing since pretty much the beginning of me streaming, because I was a final year psychology student when I started streaming, and it's a huge hobby and passion of mine to make sure not only do I have positive and healthy mental health balance with my own life, but also I have a helper personality, which is showcased not only in the way that I assist people with mental health questions, comments, and concerns, or my day job where I'm in a support role as a engineer, and then finally also assisting people when they have questions about how do I start streaming, how do I get partnered, how do I get community managers, and so on. So I've been well known for all of those things in my 4 years on Twitch. So here I am.
It's a really beautiful explanation, actually.
Wow.
A lot of stuff I actually didn't personally know, so that was really good to hear. Yeah, we invited somebody who makes me feel like I'm just gonna go elsewhere. You, Jesse, you can have the channel. We're good.
Yeah, like this is Jessy's podcast now. I'll see you guys later.
Kaitie, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and I guess there's also a reason you kind of wanted to do this as well.
So my name is Kaitie, or you may know me as KaitiePlays on Twitch. I am a very casual variety streamer, but as I'm sure some of you guys know, I like to play a lot of Overwatch. But the reason I was really excited that I was approached to pilot this first episode was I have been looking for a way to more so encourage like transparency within my community regarding my own experiences with mental health and even their own experiences with mental health, because I find that it's something that I've always been passionate about, and I'm just more so working on myself and allowing myself to be more open and upfront with my community as to why my stream schedule varies for whatever reason, or why some days are a bit more consistent than others, because I do have my own struggles with mental health. And I find that I'm just really looking to enhance that feeling of community and togetherness with the people that watch my streams, because I think it's, especially if you deal with mental health issues yourself, I find that it's very important to have, some sort of support group that you could surround yourself with, because as I'm sure a lot of people know, it can feel very alone sometimes. And if anything, I want to figure out and learn ways on how to encourage people to be open with me as well as others in my community, so we can really form, more of an idea of a family where we don't have to be afraid to share how we're feeling. And I'm just really looking forward to being able to educate myself on how to, I guess, I don't know, shape those ideas within my community.
I actually really like that you brought a sort of a willingness to learn, because that's the idea for this episode, right? A lot of people have approached me, and I'm sure it's not a question that like Jesse doesn't get every now and again, where it's, you know, how do you even start that conversation, and how do you not really groom people but get an entire community behind that idea, and a lot of that maybe deals with some deeper seated things that we have to face ourselves to start the conversation, right? But there's the willingness to learn, and I think that's such a wonderful foundation for something like this. So thank you for sharing, and I hope that this actually does turn out to be beneficial. So lastly, my name is Dylan. If everybody wants to know my real name is Dylan. Everybody calls me Goop or Go-Op or some variation of that. I am this is my spiel, but I'm a mental health advocate. I'm a charity streamer here on Twitch. I'm also like a Warframe partner, so if you catch me playing anything on twitch.tv/cooperatives, I will be most likely playing Warframe, but we have some sort of nonchalant, lackadaisy conversations regarding mental health on our stream. Some days we don't, some days we do. It's very organic in the nature and the way that it comes up. I am really open about my experiences with mental health. I almost 9 years ago was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. I have attempted suicide and you know, lived through that, and so I have a lot of perspectives. I am not a mental health professional, but I'm really open about my experiences, and I like to talk about my experiences anecdotally so that maybe that new, different perspective can help somebody else in some sort of way. And we have a community that's really open, very loving, very willing to support one another, even if we don't have the answers. Sometimes just having support's all you need. So that's kind of what we're about on my community, on my channel, and yeah. So, but without further ado, I guess you know, we introduced ourselves. So the topic of the day, especially sort of lately, right, with some of the news and stuff like that, is how do we discuss mental health or advocate on Twitch? I know discussions with Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain have, you know, I actually used sort of those as conversations to like, how do we, you know, how can we reach out? How can we do better? How can we talk about this? I personally believe that on Twitch, there's sort of a need to talk about it more, right? Because I think internet communication is obviously a huge part of our day-to-day lives. It's easier to reach out to people, but it's also way easier to isolate yourself away from people by having nothing but internet communication and interaction. So how do we create spaces? How do we talk about it so that you know, we are bringing that awareness to people in a meaningful way? So yeah, I guess I know that personally Jesse had quite a few notes on her docket, if you will, to talk about this. So did you want to start us off?
Sure. So specifically, I think one of the greatest jumping points that someone can start off with to start discussing and advocating for mental health on their Twitch channel. Twitch actually published a educational article in early March of this year under Twitch Cares. So it talks about if you feel like you're struggling, or if you encountered someone that you think might be self-harming or suicidal or harming others, how to contact law enforcement or a suicide hotline. And it gives you a few indexes to jump through. So you need to find a suicide hotline for yourself or your friend. What should you do? If you see someone posting about it in chat, are there resources specifically for LGBTQ plus users, and so on and so forth. So if you're someone who has just kind of started coming to this sort of topic, to mental health, to self-care, to psychology, and in the light of wanting to support it on Twitch, I think that's a really good starting place to kind of get your bearings, understand a few of the terminologies. For instance, I just took the mental health first aid certification in April of this year. And I do have a psychology degree, and I do have experience in giving talk therapy. as a peer supporter and a therapist. But I recently learned that the new terminology is that we don't say so-and-so committed suicide. That's incorrect. What we should say is someone died from suicide, because the word commit puts a lot of negative connotation and makes suicide as a topic in general more and more taboo and something that people keep hush hush. And that's the opposite of what we want, because everyone, even if they're in a very healthy mental state throughout their whole life, has thought about it. Like the brush of death, there's this French phrase for it, and I don't know French, so I wouldn't be able to say it anyway properly. But basically, the call of the void, I think, is the direct translation, where you think for a second, like, what if I just jump out into traffic? Or what would happen if I just fell asleep and didn't wake up? So, like, those are technically suicidal thoughts, not necessarily self-harming ones, or ones that are rooted in depression or anxiety or overstress from life. But we've all kind of danced with thinking about the idea. So it shouldn't be something taboo to just check in on someone and say, hey, you know, I've noticed that you don't hang out with us very often. Is everything all right? Or saying something like, hey, when you do hang out, you seem kind of spaced out, something on your mind. Just getting those conversations going, seizing the awkwardness of bringing something like this up. It's very difficult to realize that you might be stumbling into some really heavy thoughts with a friend, with a coworker, with your bus buddy that you sit next to on the way into work or into school or something. You might not really know each other, but just kind of reaching out and humanizing each other and saying, hey, I know life is hard sometimes, or it feels like it's hard ever since you can remember, but I'm here for you and I'll vent it out with you, are really important. Wow, I just went through a lot of things right there, and you need to stop me from just talking.
No,
because I will.
I was to say that was, in my opinion, like, one, a lot of that information was information I'm not aware of, right? Because for a few reasons, I think I'm not like as in the know, but for for a variety of other reasons, I think that's not really common knowledge, and it should be, right? So I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So I'm completely glad you shared. And I would agree with most of those points. Like, yeah, I think, especially in our community, we have that, like, even me and my mods sort of behind closed doors. If we see somebody like hasn't shown up to the community in like a week or even 2 weeks, we often go like, have you heard from this person? No. Have you? Okay. Well, maybe one of us should reach out. Are they okay? Are they doing well? So, yeah, like, I think that's incredibly important, even if it doesn't, we do it in a more nonchalant way. Like, hey man, how you doing? You doing all right? You doing good? Instead of, it sort of just depends on person to person. But I know for advocacy here on Twitch, I always make it super apparent that I'm not a mental health professional. I think that's a good disclaimer to have, because oftentimes, and this kind of goes into like, where do we draw the line with our advocacy? We talk about it, right? And we're willing to talk about it. So sometimes we get seen as like these beacons, right? Or maybe as we're therapists, and we're totally not. It could be cathartic to talk in a chat with other people and to share ideas, right? But it's definitely, I can't be your therapist. And so I personally have drawn the line at, if anybody, like, I don't answer my DMs that often. If it's, hey man, can I talk to you for 10 minutes? I'm struggling. Like, I don't offer that sort of one-on-one help, because we have a venting section in our Discord, but if you feel that on a regular basis you may need like a therapeutic outlet, that maybe it would be important to seek some professional help. And that's not always like an option. I know, depending on like, insurance, and there's all kinds of complications, but unfortunately I still, regardless of the complications, I can't unfortunately substitute that. So I think that's a really good point, is learn where your barriers are and where kind of you should be. I think there's a good standard. Like, I don't think any of us should put ourselves in the way or be faux therapists or anything like that. I don't think anybody wants to, but making that really, really upfront and very clear, and then finding where you want to place your boundaries in regards to maybe like even your own story, right? Advocacy for me meant like, well, let me share my story and let me talk about what I want to talk about. For some people, if they've attempted suicide in some form or another, no matter the duration of time that's passed. Some people may not want to talk about that, and so you kind of need to determine if you're willing to talk. I'm pretty open about discussing it. For me personally, it helped to shape me in the way that I think about life today.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah. And so it's, for me, it's very much like, well, I'm okay with it. And that's just kind of how I am. So I think there are avenues that you should take to figure out where your limit is personally that's going to keep you from feeling too emotionally vulnerable, because there is a fear of potentially just divulging too much information and having that out in the world, right? And that can be scary. I get that. So and then just in terms of methodology, like I said, I have a really lackadaisy way of doing it on my streams. In Warframe, there's a lot of people that are like, wow, this is a great wholesome Warframe stream. And I'm like, it's really weird because we're just shooting bad guys and talking about mental health, right? But there are people that just do podcasts. There are people like Anxiety, where they have really wholesome and very frequent conversations, right? And that's the focus of their cast for a duration of time. And it's finding your avenue on how you want to talk about mental health, I think, is really important. But I've done the Jesse thing. I've talked too much. No, just I do want to defer to Kaitie because I want to see kind of how you feel about it, and maybe your outside opinion as you maybe start to approach talking about it more often. How do you feel?
I think I kind of want to go back for a second and talk about what you were mentioning about reaching out to a more like like a professional, a trained professional.
Sure.
And one thing that I think is really cool that I've seen been happening like a lot more over the recent years is how much more accessible like reaching out to people and trained professionals has become. Like I remember when I was first dealing with my own mental health and just starting to experience it and not being really sure about what I should do about it. There were always hotlines and stuff like that I never wanted to call because big source of my anxiety was talking to people on the phone and stuff like that. And so, I mean, of course I turned to like friends from online and stuff like that. But now I'm seeing, there's text hotlines that you can use and stuff like that. And I think that that's really cool because it just adds another avenue of accessibility to these things that I feel like everyone should have, regardless of what anxieties they're facing or whatever. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think for me personally, I'm still coming to terms with being more open with myself about how I feel about certain things regarding my mental health. It was a very big, it was a journey for me to work on being able to verbalize how I was feeling and talk to people about it. Because at first, I had that initial, I don't want to talk about this with people because I didn't want to be a burden on them because they have their own, things to be worrying about. I don't want to be that extra burden on them.
Absolutely.
But then I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier today where I was having, my parents and friends were all reaching out to me, some of which who had even dealt with the same things. They were constantly like, if you need help, we're here for you, we're here to support you. And that meant a lot to me because I was discussing it with somebody earlier today and they were having the same thoughts of, well, mostly everyone I know deals with depression or anxiety or what have you, and I don't want to be that person to them. And I told them, well, if they're telling you, if they're reaching out to you, they care about you and they want to see you doing well. And you should take value in that because that shows that they really care. If they're dealing with their own struggles, putting themselves out there for you means a lot. And regarding streaming on Twitch, it's still something that's fairly new to me. I've only been streaming on Twitch since about October of last year, and now I realize I'm kind of going through that same struggle of being open with a brand new group of people that I'm beginning to know. And it's becoming probably too easy for me to be, I'm sorry guys, I can't stream today, I'm just not really feeling up to it, when in reality, I'm having a bad, anxiety day or depression day or whatever. And I really am working towards being more open with my community and saying, my depression's really getting to me today. I don't think it would be a good idea for me to stream. But at the same time, I still have those moments of self-doubt where I almost feel like I'm letting myself down if if I have a really good streak with streaming one week and then the next week I'm off the grid because work has just gotten tiring for me and I just need a break. And I almost feel like I don't know what the word would be. I'm not allowing my community to thrive in the way that it should be because I can't be present, during these times.
Sure. And
I really want to get to a point where I, again, can just be open up front with them. And I think, seeing people discuss mental health much more openly lately has been very encouraging to me, because it's something that I think is becoming, much more recognized and I guess easier to talk about in a way, because we have so many, again, accessible routes of information that you can go to if you aren't, quite sure how to handle something or how to handle what someone may be going through, or you just don't understand it. And something that I've always encouraged people in my streams to do is kind of like Dylan was mentioning earlier, that willingness to learn and that willingness to be better and, learn how to help people or learn more about yourself and how you're feeling, I think is really, really important, especially with all of the information that's been flying at us regarding, issues of mental health lately, with things that have been happening in the news regarding, suicides, celebrity suicides and stuff like that. So I think it's just really important to maintain that open conversation that's constantly happening. And I guess it's my turn to stop talking so much. Yeah.
No, I was fixing to say I'm heftily inclined to. I feel like you and I have walked a lot of the same path. I've only been streaming. It'll be like as of next month, it'll have been 2 full years. And I wasn't always having these conversations on Twitch. I wasn't always talking about my anxiety or my suicide. It actually wasn't until maybe 8 months ago that I decided, like, this is kind of the avenue I want to take, because I was in the same vein. I was very much struggling for like a variety of reasons, right? Where, because Twitch has its own stressors, right? Because I always knew that Twitch entertainment and sort of edutainment was kind of how I always wanted to direct myself, and Twitch seemed like that avenue. And like the stresses that came with Twitch sometimes were more than I wanted to like admit, and it was hard to explain and things like that. And yeah, it was harder to keep going and saying, hey, I'm not feeling great. Hey, I don't, because people are like, are you just like sick or what's going on? And so we just sort of did a pivot, if you will, and I just started introducing myself as a mental health advocate, as somebody who is a charity streamer, and sort of just started having organic conversation. I think the conversation started happening organically, just that way, exactly that way, just organically. We just started talking about it, and you sort of start to weed out community members that fall in line with that or are okay with that. Very quickly, I had people that were like, can we not talk about this? And I was like, I think it's important to talk about this. And you can't, there's that growing pain. There's that period of time where talking about mental health on Twitch is, for a lot of people, not comfortable, because it brings up memories, it brings up bad blood, and it is a very sort of awkward thing for certain people. And not everybody's going to want to take part in that, but a lot of people will fall in tune with that, and the community starts to sort of align itself, if you will, and I know in our case, it's helped the entire community to fall very much in love with one another. Like I said, in our Discord, our venting section and our triumph section even is probably like my favorite things just to kind of scroll through every now and then. And I know kind of what Jesse said is like I sort of have like a very much a helper mentality. So if I'm feeling depressed or anxious or XYZ, sometimes it's just helpful for me to help someone else. It just kind of gets me out of my own head for a little bit and maybe give some anecdotal advice and just kind of run with it. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm not the best at it. I don't think there's a best, but I'm certainly not. But it's something I think I want to continue to make happen. I have a strong belief that on Twitch, like I said, I would say if a bold, random, not factual statistics at all, but I would say 50% of everybody on Twitch struggles with some sort of mental health illness, whether that's depression or anxiety or something even deeper than that, right? I think because Twitch does allow you, and in a lot of ways, like I said, it does promote that sort of isolationist. You can talk to people without really having to leave your house or put on clothes, right? So when you're feeling at your lowest, you pop a stream on and you might chat, you might not, you might just lurk in a stream for 8 months before you say hi. But it very much, I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen on Twitch because I think that there's a lot of good that can be done. So I don't know how do you feel about that, Jesse, regarding Twitch and not really like intentionally promoting that sort of behavior, but like regarding mental health and Twitch, how do you think it's going so far?
Good. I mean, in regards to statistics, it's about 1 in 5 American adults have a mental health condition, which is about 40 million Americans. And for youth, mental health is worsening. So there's about 8.5% since 2015 who say that they have severe depression that has been diagnosed. So it is something that is becoming a growing issue, not only in the sense that people are getting more depressed, more anxious. They are having environmental stressors that bring out the genetic code that that makes them these ways. But also, in regards to us having all of this advocacy and all of this awareness, people are coming out and saying like, oh, you know what? Like I hit 5 out of the 8 typical symptoms of someone who has severe depression. Maybe I need to get this checked out. And that's a good thing that it seems like the stats are rising because people are getting help as they need it. There are more access to services via insurance and outpatient treatment, and healthcare reform in the US has reduced the rates of uninsured adults in America who are able to go and get this extra type of assistance. But unfortunately, because of the way that our healthcare system is and the reform wasn't exactly perfect, the statistic is over 56% of Americans that have a mental illness that has been officially diagnosed do not receive treatment. And even in Maine is the best state that has the best access to mental health initiatives and treatments. About 42% of those adults who have a diagnosed mental illness do not receive treatment in the last 3 years. So it's something that there is still a lot of stigma about it. I have a lot of knowledge of psychology, and I have not gotten an official diagnosis because I am petrified of either getting a yes, you do have an issue, or no, you don't have an issue. Because either way, knowing that, oh, I have this illness, feels like it's labeling me and black boxing me into being a certain way for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And then what if the therapist says, no, actually, you're just a little bitch and you can't handle life and you're weak. So
that would be the worst. Just get a new doctor.
Of course. Always get second and third opinions in anything.
Yes.
In health, in moving to a new job, into relationship advice, and so on. Always put your fingers in a bunch of different pots and get info. So overall, yeah, I do notice anecdotally that it seems that gamers, nerds in like the affectionate way of like, people who like sci-fi and
right.
stuff like that. Fellow geeks and stuff. It seems that a lot of us were bullied because when we were growing up, this stuff wasn't cool. And now it's like becoming cool because we're adults and now we can make these movies and these TV shows and these games. So like there's this disconnect that's going on. And it does seem like within these groups of people that I identify with and I've been around in my whole life that it's a little bit more of some mental health conditions and issues. But I also think that because we've had video games and TV shows within our spheres that have touched on these subjects seemingly much sooner than mainstream media really got to it, that we're a little bit more open to being like, hey, I kind of feel the same way, or I went through something similar and it gets better. Like, if you ever need to vent or if you ever need to forget, like, I'm here for you. I'm a shoulder to cry on, or I'm a buddy that you can go and run around in a game with and just, be silly for a few hours. And I think that's important for all of us to take away and continue to do with each other. Just being kind to fellow humans. But at the same time, making sure that you put your own mental health and physical health and emotional health first too, because you could be the nicest person ever and wanting to do good things for others, but eventually you only have so much energy for work, for school, for your own family, for yourself, for your IRL friends. And so if someone is constantly draining you, you need to make sure that you take a step back and refill your own energy.
You can't pour from an empty glass.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree 100%. With like, even so for me, regarding like insurance and things like that, I got therapy when I was originally diagnosed so many years ago, but regarding like, I've grown up quite a bit now, right? The medical industry has sort of grown a little bit regarding the knowledge of mental health. And so I've been considering re-diagnosis, but it's one of those things where I don't have insurance because Twitch is my job. So it's a daunting financial burden for a lot of people. There are alternatives. There are sliding scales that are income based and things like that. I don't have all of the answers. That depends on your area and depends on what's available to you and things of that nature. But I've been looking into it. I think it's okay to get reevaluations every now and again. And I mirror what Jesse says wholeheartedly. Like if look for multiple opinions, if you can afford to do so, get multiple opinions, because doctors aren't maliciously misdiagnosing you, but there's a lot of overlap in diagnoses and there's a lot of overlap in symptoms, and it's really messy out there, especially depending on your age and external factors, environmental factors and things like that. It's not clear cut and it's not easy. So I firmly believe that most, if not all, doctors are doing all they can to point you in the right direction, give you as many options as possible. And it's kind of the same thing with medication. We don't mention specific medications on here or what anybody's taking, but if you're taking a medication that you don't feel is working for you, medications like, if you have depression, for instance, the way that depression manifests within your physiology isn't going to be the same as the next person. So a doctor's only doing their best to try to narrow it down for you, to try to get you the thing that works for you. And keeping a dialogue open very much with your doctor in that regard is super important as well. Just dialogue. I know it's not easy and it's really easy to sort of retreat, but I firmly believe that there's no harm that can come, especially in those scenarios, from just being honest about how you are feeling, especially when it comes to like your treatment. But I do want to loop back real quick to where to draw the line regarding advocacy on your own channel. And we've run into this a little bit lately, and you sort of mentioned it, right? Self-harm in your chat, somebody coming in and go, I want to kill myself, I want to die, things like that. Also, things that are out of our control or behaviors that we can't control, right? So those are two things. I know personally when it comes to advocacy, and this is the route I've taken, and maybe Jesse and Kaitie can offer different perspectives, but when it comes to somebody coming in and especially somebody that's newer to the channel who just sees our title and goes, wow, I can like be here and be in this space. When it comes to somebody who just says they want to kill themselves, right? it is a tangled web, right? For me personally, this is my personal thing, and maybe I may change the way I do things based on like, you know, forthcoming information here in a bit, but we give them resource hotline numbers, text numbers, the deaf hotline, and things like that. When it comes down to it, I basically abstain from really continuing the conversation too much further than that. I always offer to sort of change topic and just, hey, do you need a friend? You want to play games? You want to hang out? You know, we're welcome to have you. But I think that and in my experience, there's a bit of a burden that can come with if you're the last point of contact that gives bad advice and person ends up passing away or whatever. In that regard, it becomes sort of tough, and I don't know how you feel about that, Jesse, regarding what you should and shouldn't do and what you should and should not stray away from. And I don't there are certain legal implications there as well. Yep. And so you have to be sort of really careful with how you approach those topics, and it is a darker sort of conversation to have, right? But like I said, a lot of people will look to streamers as therapists, and your circumstance, I think it's okay to ask, like, why are you feeling that way? And, can we maybe redirect the conversation organically? But if it keeps going forward, I guess, how would you handle those scenarios? How do you handle that conversation besides just giving as much information, giving tools, and giving resources?
Yeah, so I've definitely encountered that over the years. And for the most part, my current stance on that is if someone comes in and says, they're new and they're like, I want to kill myself, or I'm attempting suicide tonight. I usually time them out for a whole day. And I will, stop the cast and say, hey, if you want to self-harm yourself, these are resources that will assist you with that. I am not a medical health professional. I am not your therapist. I am not a family or friend member, a family member or a friend. There's only so much I can do from behind my screen, and this is the best thing, not only for you, but also for me and my community, because there's nothing I could do when I have no idea how far away I am for that person. But when it's someone who's pseudo regular or, a subscriber, and they're like, man, I'm having a really rough day and I feel hopeless. Like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. I have sent them a message letting them know, hey, I'm here for you. I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. Like, let me know what I can do to help you out. But like, obviously I'm broadcasting at the moment. I'm being an entertainer. I also, when I'm not broadcasting, I'm living my own life. There's only so much I can do. And even those who are professionals who advocate online, either on Twitter, on Patreon, on Caffeine, and all of these other different places that people can have these sort of conversations and show up as an influencer in this sphere, they are not your official doctor or your official psychologist. And you do not have a medical contract with them, and you are not their official client. So we can give each other advice and feedback and sympathy from one human to another, one heart to heart. But that's it. And once your comfort is you're uncomfortable as the broadcaster, it's your cast, you are the dictator, what you say goes. Like, you can ban all your mods, you can turn it into sub only mode for 2 years, even though like there's no possible way people could have gotten to that point yet or something, and have no one chat. So you need to remember that you do have those tools as well. And it might seem harsh, but for the most part, I have seen the same usernames come around into either Twitter conversations or in IRL or talk show casts about mental health in the last few months or few years, who say these things. They get banned, or like, they get this information from hotlines and stuff, and then they just do it again like the next week. And I understand that it is a possibility that this person actually does need help, and they're trying to reach out for attention because they don't have anyone in real life, in person, to really reach out to. But a lot of the time it can also be like trolling, and unfortunately there's a lot of that on the internet because of the anonymousness. People can just be like, lol, mental health, none of this really matters, I'm just going to say crazy stuff to get attention. So the only thing that I think you can really do is if there's a conversation that you're not really comfortable with, it doesn't even have to be as deep and difficult as one when people are talking about suicide or hopelessness and so on. But like if they start talking about like, you know, the conversation kind of gets lewd and silly in the chat and it's fun and everything, and all of a sudden they're like, when did you lose your virginity? It's like, whoa. Like, yeah, sure, we were talking about sex, but like, whoa, chillax, like, you know, slow your roll, we're discussing something else now. Or like, hey, we're keeping this lighthearted here. Especially if you're someone who's just starting out with mental health advocacy online or even in person. One of the best things that you can keep in mind is just making sure that you listen non-judgmentally and give reassurance and information and redirect them to professional help. Those are the three main things that anyone should keep in mind. So you can say things like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear you're going through that. I really don't know what to say. Hopefully you can just relax and lurk here and have a better night with me just being silly and dying a bunch in Overwatch, for instance. And if they keep pushing it, then, like I said before, you're the dictator. And if it's making the conversations a little bit too dark and it's something that is way over your pay grade as a free live entertainer on the internet, then you need to make the tough call of getting rid of that person. And it's unfortunate because you could have the thought of like, what if I was the last person they ever talked to and they actually did attempt suicide that night, and what if it was like successful? Like what if you can get into a huge anxiety ball over that. But there isn't, like, we're over the internet, there isn't much we can do when we're not there physically or we don't know a person in real life in order to really assist them. And that's the unfortunate thing about online relationships and friendships and acquaintanceships. You really do want to be there for people, and you can get a very similar simulation of what real life relationships are. And of course, like I met my husband online and we dated through the internet for many years, and we've gotten together and we like live together now and everything. So like it's possible, but it is difficult to really simulate the way that real life relationships work and can support each other, because you don't see nonverbal communication. You don't notice that they come in later and later to work, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. And those are the kind of things that you need to be able to pick up on as someone who is an advocate for mental health. And it's a lot of mental and emotional taxation on you. So like I said, again, make sure that you practice self-care tips for yourself too. And sometimes you just have to disconnect. So there are times where like I don't stream for a week or two, and it's because I'm focusing on my own mental health. I'm a few minutes late to work too many times in the morning, and I'm like, nope, I have to make sure that I take care of number one first, because if I don't, then I can't really help anyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree that like having like a hard, not like I mean, because those things will develop, right? Like how far, like where that boundary is for what you're willing to put up with and whatnot. Those are gonna develop as you develop. I don't know, Katie. I think that's interesting. Like I said, considering you're looking into doing this sort of stuff. How do you feel? I mean, do you have any sort of different perspectives on, or have you ever had to deal with anybody coming in and saying anything like that? I don't know necessarily how far you've gone into conversations of the like.
So I've never had, I've never experienced something like that in my streams. But I have, experienced those times of people coming in and being like, I'm having like a really rough time right now, like I don't really know what I should be doing and stuff like that. It never came to the extreme of, like I want to kill myself or anything. But, anytime anyone comes into my chat and says something like that, I always make it a point to recognize them and tell them, like, hey, kind of like Jesse was saying, hey, I'm sorry you're having such a rough time, but if you want, you're more than welcome to hang out with us. If you want, you can play some games, let's just hang out and we can decompress for a bit and it'll be fine. But I also know, I guess I've dealt with that more more in real life, because at my last two jobs, the job I'm at now and the job I recently just left, I'm in management position. So I was a supervisor at my last job. And, it was, since I had dealt with things like that on my own, it was, I guess, a bit easier for me to notice when, you know, somebody was coming into work a bit later, or, calling out maybe a bit too much. And, next time I would have the chance to see them, I would always make it a point to reach out and be like, hey, like, is everything going, is everything okay? Like, I noticed you've been running late lately, is it just like a timing thing, or like, you just need to sit and talk for a second? Because I guess with how I am as a person, I've never wanted anyone to feel like they can't talk to me. I'm a pretty open person, but when it comes to my stream, I still have those times where I struggle with, even if somebody comes in and they're even saying some questionable things, I'm still sometimes dealing with that thought of like, ooh, like, am I being too harsh? Like, am I just being a jerk?
Right.
But then, because nobody, let's face it, nobody wants to be mean, but sometimes you have to put your foot down, and that's something that I'm learning. I had the chance to attend a panel at PAX East, and it was specifically catered towards, it was a bit different than this, but it was catered towards being a female streamer and how to keep yourself safe in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And, they really put an emphasis on, it's your stream, it's your show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get to decide what happens or doesn't happen. And it's, I guess I'm lucky in the sense that my community is, smaller comparatively, and we haven't had to deal with anything like that ourselves. But, I always, regardless if somebody comes in and they're having a tough night, it's comforting to me to have the knowledge of resources that I can give them in order to help when I can't. Because, there have been times where I mod a couple Discord servers for other streamers and other friends and stuff like that. And there have been times when people use, the Discord as a place to vent those feelings, or, to express those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And in Discord servers, Dylan's, you have your venting section and things like that, where that's, I guess more, it's much more of an open conversation in that regard. But there have been multiple times where I've had to, delete messages and private message someone explaining, hey, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way, but this just isn't really the place where we like to discuss those kinds of things. But if you ever need to talk, here are some resources of people that can help you, or,
Mm-hmm.
some outlets that you can use to get these thoughts out. Because at the end of the day, I've even experienced those, I guess, thoughts of looking up to somebody that inspires me, I guess, to a certain point, and realizing that they are just, they're an entertainer, they're here to put on, a good show for everyone and to make everyone laugh, and especially in my stream, I really want to cultivate an idea of positivity. I always want to keep the mood light in my streams, whether it's just me, messing around in Overwatch or listening to silly music. I never want it to be a place where, where that vibe comes.
Fire and brimstone and
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And and that's another reason why, when there's days where I'm not feeling 100%, I don't want to necessarily put myself out there, because I always want to be putting my best foot forward for my community and people that choose to join in my stream. And I think that at certain points, I've learned that it's okay to take those off days for myself and recharge myself, because even at my job, I'm a very introverted person, and at my job, I'm talking to people all day, And sometimes I come home and I'll have a stream scheduled and I'll just be so mentally exhausted. And then that's when I have to be like, hey, I'm sorry it's late, you guys, but I'm just really not feeling up for it tonight. Let's reschedule for another night this week so we can have, a good time. Because it's just never been something that I've wanted to. It's hard because it's never been something that I want to ignore if that does ever happen in my stream. But I'm also, still learning how to draw the line and be like, hey, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way, but let's, here are some things that might be able to help you, because I personally don't think I'm in a position to.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah. I would agree that being an advocate sort of has its ups and downs in a lot of ways. And a lot of that can come. There's an interesting duality to it, right? Where you have a community that's really warm, very opening, very, very like welcoming, right? So somebody can come in and be like, "Hey, man, I had a hard day," and you go, "Cool. Well, like, you want to talk about it? What's up? What's going on?"
Yeah. Exactly.
There are then people that will come in and it sort of depends on the person, and this isn't like an accusatory, inflammatory statement or anything, but there's this sort of tendency to come in and go like, "Oh, I'm doomed," and you go, "Well, what's going on?" You kind of want to talk about it, and they're like, "Nope, I just, there's no hope for me," and you're like, "So, okay, well, let's chill, like, let's play some video games, maybe get your mind off it," and like, well, and they sort of push this whole, they won't accept your advice, they won't accept your help, they won't talk about it, they won't open up about it, they want to sort of exist in that space, and there's
that
like
guilt trip.
Sort of, yeah. And in a lot of ways, it's either a guilt trip or they may genuinely feel that way. But I always have to do hard stop. Hey, like, we have an open, welcoming community here, but unfortunately, like, I'm not telling you how to feel or how to exist in this space, but we do have a community that is, fairly uplifting. And if you, are going to sort of pull the chat down to your level in sort of a way, if it does pull the mood down, if you want to lurk, you can lurk, that's great, but like, this is still a warm community, this is still a wholesome community, and if we can't help you, right, and I'm not saying you can't talk about your issues, but if you also reject any attempt at help, then I'm not sure this is the spot for you in this exact moment. And there's like the extreme to that, where I always say that having a mental health disorder is not an excuse for poor behavior, right?
Absolutely.
If you're diagnosed with something, right, and we've experienced this with certain diagnoses, and the behaviors you exhibit are that of being potentially sort of can make people feel a little creeped out, people feel that you're aggressive, people feel that if it is a detriment to my community, whether it's in Discord or in chat, unfortunately, again, I have to say full stop. I understand you're dealing with these things, right? I give you one warning, but however, the way that you're communicating doesn't seem to be conducive to how we run the stream. Either you are aggressive, you are making people feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? So just try to maybe think about how you're, the intent behind your message, and maybe try to communicate a little bit more effectively. If that doesn't work, though, it is a hard ban. It is a removal from Discord, because like what Jesse said, at the end of the day, one, it's your show, you got to run it how you see fit, but also if that doesn't match the way that your content exists in this space, or the way that you would like it to, then that obviously isn't healthy either. So there is sort of that, you have to full stop. Even, if it's very light, there's that light passive way of sort of being not a downer, but this sort of willingness to kind of exist in a negative space. And for you, that may be potentially helpful advice, because like I said, you're like what you said, your stream is, you try to be as uplifting as possible. You can have those conversations, but being uplifting, in light of that may be, your thing. But and then there's the full stop, sort of you're maybe coming on a little strong here, or being intentionally XYZ. So and I would say finding out where your lines are, and like where you want to sort of make that definitive distinction. We sort of, as the community has grown, we have attracted people that we see that more common than not, where it's very much this sort of aggression that whether diagnosed or not, I have to be like, whoa, pump the brakes there, Tonto.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about this. And even in Discord, so I think that's also really important. You have to maintain your community while also doing this, and you're not equipped. None of us are equipped necessarily to be able to diffuse that situation, nor do we get paid to. So yeah, I think that's important to be like, well, this isn't my job, so I don't have to deal with this kind of behavior, and engaging your community's level of willingness to handle those situations as well. So but I think this is I guess, does anyone have anything else they want to say on the subject, or talk about any other bullet points maybe I missed or we missed?
No, I think we touched everything nicely.
Yeah.
It was definitely a back and forth and very messy conversation, but
yeah,
I liked it.
I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good information in there and really good perspectives that we don't ordinarily get, I would say.
Yeah.
What I would like to do is, if anybody in the chat wants to hop in Discord, this is where we'll do sort of an open forum. If you have questions for myself, for Jesse, or for Kaitie, there's a waiting room voice section where you can hop in and we can pull you into into where we are, and you can ask an open forum question. I don't have any problems with that. Just be sure that it's fairly concise, right? Try to reduce the ramblings a little bit as we approach our final 30-ish minutes. May need to cut that a little sooner as per needed. So but yeah, if anybody wants to hop into that, we could also take questions from chat if you would prefer, but like I said, the waiting room is kind of where I would I think that's an interesting vocal segment, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have an individual, Huggin Guns, who's been with the community for a while, so we're gonna pull him in and we'll see. Hey Hug, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. How you been?
I'm good. So I have a question for you guys. So I've been slowly getting into more and more into streaming, and I have these friends who we have a very crass sense of humor, but I'm trying to create a positive environment for my stream. I'm trying to improve myself. I want to be better. I'm trying to set an example as part of my New Year's resolution. I just want to be a better person in general. How would I tell my friends that while they're in the Discord, I want them to be a little upbeat? I want them to be themselves, but I don't want them to cross that line, if you get my drift.
So the way that I would go about that, the way that I would go about that is try to compare it to an analogy like being at work. You want to take this streaming thing a little bit more seriously. It's not just, oh, we're just gaming, but like online with other people. You want this to be a serious hobby, and because of that, just the same way at work, like, yeah, you sometimes can make crass jokes, but that is not the norm in the majority of jobs, and you're always very professional and courteous, and don't harass others, and so on. And so that's the kind of air that you want to have in your Discord as well as your stream. And if they are true friends, they'll understand that, and they'll keep their more crass behaviors to private DMs and off stream when you guys game together. If you still want to game with them because they're like a really great group of people to PvP with and something, you can mute Discord or whatever programs that you're using to chat, so you can hear them, but the stream can't. So there's various different types of software that can help you out with that as well. I think like virtual voice banana meter, I think is the term.
Yeah. It is.
I think I've heard of that before. Yeah.
There's a software that will do that for you, so you will be able to hear them, but the stream won't. I haven't played around with that for like 2 years, so I don't know if it's updated for 10. I don't know if it
I believe so. Yeah.
I remember when I was I remember when I was playing with it, it didn't work with my my audio setup for whatever reason, because I guess I didn't have a sound card that was supported, so like it just didn't work. So yeah, looking into things like that. And then if you can't, you can never ever control another person's behavior. You can suggest for them to act certain ways when they're in certain situations, but if they continue to want to be completely themselves and have no regard for other people's comfort or requests, then you have to kind of put your foot down and like, hey, when I'm streaming, I can't have you guys in voice chat with me, or yeah, you guys are just way too crass in the jokes and the memes that you post on my Discord, so I'm gonna have to remove you
Yeah.
from my streaming one. We can still be in private and personal ones, but like, hey, this is a professional. This is a serious thing that I'm doing. Like, please respect my hobby. That's what I would
Yeah.
say. That's what I've done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no. You can go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay, I'll keep it concise. Yeah, I would say I don't have a lot of IRL friends. Let's be honest with ourselves here. So I haven't really dealt with like long-term IRL friends that I've sort of tried to mold into this area. But we have some really great friends in our Discord, for instance. And sometimes like there's this tendency to get a little far, even in like actual chat. Not necessarily in Discord, but I think it still falls under the same vein where you're like, hey man, I love you. I think your humor is amazing. It makes me laugh a lot. However, right, for the community that we're trying to build, if somebody new comes into chat and they see that, it sets a precedent for how they perceive the stream, and it may actually encourage negative behavior in chat as well. So we have to, setting the expectation and maybe backing up as to why you want them to act that way. Not just, hey man, can you pull it back? But, hey, it may affect how people come in. It may induce further trolling, and we don't want that. I want the stream to be XYZ, a pillar for this and that. Just sort of showing your expectations and hoping they fall in line. What Jesse said, you can't control anybody, but you can set those expectations. And if they can't necessarily respect that, then maybe not that you need to like not have that friend, but maybe they don't need to interact while you're streaming in that same way, or you need to find an alternative so that the way they interact isn't reflected in the stream. Because I think it is important. You got to set a precedent there, and if that's a negative portion of it, then you got to kind of take the measures necessary. But I think having an open, honest dialogue before the stream or even after or something like that is the best way to start it, for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I've actually faced this a couple times since I've been streaming. It was getting to the point where, I had just started streaming. I wasn't really taking into account the things that they might possibly say on stream until I realized that, jokes or humor or whatever that they were talking about, kind of like you guys were saying, didn't really line up with what I wanted, to be happening in my stream. And so, it got to the point where I told them up front, like, hey, we can't really talk like that on stream. I'd really appreciate it if you try to keep that sort of joking elsewhere, because that's not something that I want to be. That's not something that I want to portray to people. That's not what I want the tone of my stream to be. Like, I'm totally cool if you guys want to play games, but, like, that's just not how it's going to work for me. And it got, it kind of got to the point where when we'd play together on stream, it didn't really get any better. And so it got to the point where whenever one of my go-to game on stream is Overwatch, and I'd get a message from someone asking to queue together, and I'd be like, I can't, I'm streaming right now, I'm sorry, because I didn't want to have that possibility of someone saying something that I didn't want to be said on my stream.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if they're your friends, like, they'll understand. They'll be like, yeah, for sure, that's good. And I always tell people, hey, I'm streaming right now, but maybe later tonight, if you're still around, we can totally play a few games. Because like Jesse has said a few times tonight, it's your stream, regardless of like if they're your friend or not, and it's you are in charge of what gets said, and
Mm-hmm.
and the tone that gets to be set, and it's really important for you to enforce that, because especially if you want to be taken seriously, because I'm sure we've all seen people on Twitch saying some questionable things that may not totally personally align with what you want to be said on stream, but on your stream, but everyone's different. And I think it's just really important to understand that, like, if anything, if you really, really want to play, a few rounds of Overwatch these people. You know,
Yeah.
throw them in Discord, and talk to your stream by yourself, and then you can still hear what they're saying and have those conversations, because
Mhm.
it's your stream and you get to dictate it.
Yep. Yeah, I was
Thank
gonna
you,
say. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with everything. So that's actually a really good question. Especially, like, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, cause like I have a few friends that I would love to bring on, but like I love them to death. I know they're sincere. I know they're good people, but they say some kind of crass things. And I was just wondering, how do I bring about asking them,
Well,
hey, I want to bring on your stream. Would you be willing to do this for me? So thank you guys for the, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for being the first volunteer, if you will. So I appreciate it.
Hey,
Thank you.
no problem, man.
Awesome.
All
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right, later.
Yeah, that was actually a really phenomenal
solid.
question. Yeah, I really enjoyed that a lot. So, like I said, if anybody wants to hop in Discord into the waiting room section, that is where you'll be able to ask us any question. We have about 20 minutes left. We can end early if necessary, or if you absolutely have a fear of having your voice broadcasted or heard, that's absolutely okay. I understand that, so you can obviously ask a question in chat. Yeah. Let's say I get that. Obviously, mental health and anxiety, wanting to not have your voice heard it happens. I understand. Yeah, I was gonna say what was it actually addressed in chat was that even if you have friends, sometimes that reminder is helpful, especially if you're longtime friends, right? Because you could forget, as well. So we have Heroes Time, who is also a longtime friend. Glad to have you. Let's have him pop in. Hey, what's up, Hero?
Hello.
Let me turn you up a little bit here, friend. All right, what you got for us?
For someone like me, I would like to get into streaming, but every time I turn on the recorder and all that to start broadcasting, my anxiety kicks in. It's like, oh, people are watching you, and I can't do that. Is there any help, any way of coping with something like that? Because I've been in streams with you. I've been in streams with a couple other broadcasters. When I'm in streams with them, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But it's when it's my own personal stream, that's when it starts to hit. That's when it starts to affect. It starts to.
yeah.
I
How do you count?
Oh.
That's. Sorry, did you want to?
I'd like to, because I still kind of
Yeah.
I kind of
No, of
deal with
course.
this a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've always sort of had that anxiety regarding streaming, but it's changed as I've gotten bigger, right? So the anxiety was originally, oh man, people are going to watch me. This is awkward. How's my hair? How do I look? How's the quality? Blah, blah, blah. Even now, like when I get dropped frames, right, there's a kick of anxiety where it's like, people are seeing like a stream that's not perfect and things like that. There's always sort of this whirling anxiety for me regarding streaming. When I first started, I definitely sort of identify with that. Honestly, it sort of just depends on your circumstance. What I would say is, for me, it was always, I'm going to play a game. I just happen to have a camera on, and people happen to be able to watch, right? I've always... And it sort of depends on how you stream, right? Are you really interactive? Do you narrate your own content? I personally had experience with like making YouTube videos, so I was always like my own narrator. I kind of knew how to do that. So when there's nobody in chat, I was sort of entertaining myself, if you will. So at times I forgot I was even streaming. So it sort of depends on your circumstance in that regard. But I would say always just remember you were probably going to play that game anyway, right? But now you just happen to maybe have a camera, maybe not, but have a chat that might talk to you. And that may help. It sort of depends on maybe what your anxiety, are you sort of afraid of people seeing you or trolls, or is there like a illogical fear where it's just like, I'm just anxious, I don't know. And I think that may help is identifying maybe where that stems from.
I don't know. I know I have social anxiety about being around a lot of people and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Then at that point, it may be worth. You may have to just take the deep dive a little bit, and that's terrible advice in a lot of ways because you're like, well, okay, But I know, like I said, for me, that was a fear of, had a fear of, being bad at games, people, trolls, I didn't have like a really good handle on like having an identity. And when you're a newer streamer, you sort of maybe put up with a little bit more. So you do have viewers. And so maybe even having a schedule for yourself where you're like, I'm going to stream for 2 hours and that's kind of it. And maybe I'll push it if I'm lucky. And just sort of maybe really dipping your toe in the water and deciding maybe what you want out of it in that regard may help to ease the anxiety a little bit too.
So what I'd also recommend with that is taking a few steps back. So figuring out what exactly makes you anxious about casting. Is it that other people are looking at you? Okay, turn off the webcam. You don't have to have a webcam in order to be a successful or entertaining broadcaster or content creator at all. I mean, you can look at dozens, hundreds of YouTube channels that are really popular. There's plenty of live broadcasters on Twitch who do the same thing as well too. And sometimes you might even have to take a further step back, and it's like, I don't really want to hear people. I don't want other people to just hear my voice. You can also broadcast without a microphone. It's not necessarily the best because you aren't able to interact as easily. You'd have to like type and chat with other people, but kind of peeling back the layers of what's making you anxious. Another suggestion that I would give is either find online friends or IRL friends to jump into a voice chat with you while you're broadcasting by yourself, or find other broadcasters who are very similar to you, either in size or in gameplay style or in humor, and say like, hey, let's do a co-op cast of this, just, something we're going to do on this one Saturday morning. Let's see how this works. So you have someone else to bounce off of and you don't feel like you are the spotlight. Because there's definitely times where like I said, I've been doing this for like 3-4 years, and there are times where like I'll be sitting in front of my computer about to hover over the start streaming button, and I'm like really anxious. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have makeup on.
Yeah.
I haven't streamed in like 3 weeks. I don't think the game that I chose is really popular. No one's going to show up. And then, I start streaming. Okay. The first 5 minutes, no one said anything in chat. It still says that there's only one viewer or whatever. And I'm like, fuck, no one cares about me. This is horrible. Like, this kind of thing. And sometimes you do just have to dive into it, because with situations that make you anxious, the worst thing you can do is to build it up into this huge monster, because it gets worse and worse and worse. You need to slowly introduce yourself to your fear, to your anxious trigger, in order to make you realize that it's really not that bad. And even if you fuck up somehow, like your microphone, you were accidentally using your webcam mic instead of your recording mic all night, like that stuff happens and it's okay. At least you put yourself out there. At least you tried and you've learned something from it, and you'll do better next time. And for instance, this was brought up earlier, like, oh, some people don't like, by Katie, like some people don't like calling hotlines to get help, or just using the phone in general, because it's very anxiety inducing. I remember at one of my first jobs out of college, that was like 5 years ago now. One of my functions was I had to call the printer techs to tell them to come and like fix the motherboard inside of the printers. And it took me days to psych myself up. All I had to do was, hello, I work at so-and-so. Our service number is this. This is the printer number. Please come by today or tomorrow. And that's it. But like, I couldn't do it. And now I'm like calling people, joining meetings, like, speaking up and saying, hey, no, this isn't what we agreed to. And like, I have all this like confidence and stuff now. And that came from practicing and realizing that I do know what I'm talking about. And either at work or being confident as a streamer. I am pretty, even if I don't have makeup on. I am hilarious. I have wonderful facial expressions. I make great jokes when weird things come up in games. And like, just kind of fake it till you make it. Look yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, I'm the best. Like, that stuff really does work. It sounds silly. Like some of the self-care techniques and strategies sound like this doesn't work. I am living proof that it does. Like, I promise that it does.
I totally agree with the fake it till you make it mentality, because that's me all the time. Like, I remember when I would first start streaming, And you know, it would be one of those days where I'd accidentally literally be using the webcam mic instead of my actual mic for the entire stream, and I'd watch the VOD and I'd be like, oh my god, this was terrible. I was streaming for 3 hours and no one could hear me. But then like, dude, it's one of those things where, you know, you have to understand that it's not going to be perfect from the get-go, and everyone is always going to be learning. And no, it's okay. And like, something that I guess that I mentioned before that really helped me was I don't like to pay attention to the amount of people that might be watching my streams, just because, one, if people want to lurk, then I want to let them lurk. Two, it freaks me out. Like, if I know, you know, if I know that I just got like a wild host from somebody and I see my view count shoot up, it's just like, oh, I am forgetting how to speak words and be human for, you know, the next 15 minutes until I calm down, because it psychs me up. It freaks me out. It doesn't make me, you know, I would much rather, you know, get a really awesome raid or host from someone and just be able to talk to everyone and, you know, focus on the people there rather than the number, because I know that if I even look at the number, it's gonna freak me out. Somebody just started screaming in the background of my apartment. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. It was hardly audible. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would agree. The way I've lessened a lot of my anxiety is just identifying what has made me anxious. You know, a lot of ways before I start streaming, it's, you know, every day it's, well, what if people have forgotten about me? Like, what if I am, and that is the anxiety is not rational. Let's start there. Has nothing to do with rationale or logic. Obviously nobody would just like disappear, right? But in my head, I'm like, well, what if people, you know, have forgotten about me? What if nobody shows up today? You know, I think there's a lot of turn off the numbers, right? So you don't look at your viewer count, because whether you have 0 or 10 or 100, you should put on the same type of broadcast. You should be as hype or as chill or as exciting, or you should do the best you that you can regardless of numbers going into that. But yeah, identifying, is it the camera? Are you afraid of like having bad gameplay? Are you you know, sort of finding out what triggers that fear, you know, and sort of pushing those boundaries as slowly but as being as sort of steady with it as you can, and seeing, you know, kind of seeing where it goes from there, because, you know, I think most streamers, before they turn on their broadcast, especially when they're newer, haven't streamed really much on their own before, they always have that sort of like, well, before they do it. I'm not sure how many people slam 3 Red Bulls and are like, whoa, let's start this broadcast. Like, to me, in my head, I'm like, there's a lot of people that are like, whew, all right, let's go, let's do this. But, you know, so you're not alone. I think that's important to know, that like, you're not the only person that does that. And I think there are people that are new to streaming and people that are both really veterans at streaming that still, before they go live, are just like, do the Tina bit, right? So I think helping to identify and just sitting down and going like, why do I even feel this way? And you may not be able to identify that until like you've sat down and almost clicked a button. You're like, clarity. So, but I hope that helps. It's a jumble of like you have to sort of figure it out a little bit, but I hope that was kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Good. Did you? Oh, sorry.
One of the things I haven't really ever seen a streamer not talk during the stream, though.
I've seen it.
I've seen it a few times. I know, for instance, Shull is a friend of mine. If he's not feeling well, or if his voice is shot, if he's sick, he'll put it in his title, no mic. He'll do no mic, no cam, and people will just chill and have it on and listen to the gameplay or the music or whatever. And so it does happen. I don't know how many streamers are like, that's all they do, but I know there are instances where people do that frequently during certain days. But also I'm not the most versed in terms of like knowing what a ton of other streamers do, but I think it does happen. I don't know how many streamers are no cam, no mic streamers, but I'm sure that exists.
I know
it's
one.
Really popular in like the creative community, at least on Twitch. I see a lot of people that will just, you know, stream a drawing that they're working on with some nice
Great music.
playing in the back room, and and everyone will just hang out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's a good one.
I know of a caster who is mute and who cannot actually talk. So it does exist, and she's incredibly popular, and she is in creative. So it happens. It exists for sure. And it sort of depends if you want to even do that. Do you want to do completely no mic, or do you want to do the first few casts as no mic to see how it goes? I mean, when you're a little bit newer to streaming, you can sort of take those risks really liberally without much like negative drawback. And so honestly, I would take those risks, grab a bunch of them, do a few streams no mic, do a few streams no cam, because when you first start off, there's not, you don't have 100 people watching that are going to be like, yo, what the heck? So you can kind of take those liberal risks and figure out what you want to do with your stream, because you're the boss, and figure out what makes you feel more at ease as you do it.
All right.
If that makes sense, anyway. So,
It does.
ramblings of a madman. So, did you have anything else for us here?
Nah, that was it.
Perfect. Thank you for chiming in, dude. Thank you for being a part of the cast for a while. I love you, face. I'll talk to you later, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No worries.
See you.
Well, guys, we're coming up on right around the 90-minute mark, which is kind of what we were aiming for. Did you guys have any sort of closing statements or plugs, or where can people find you? What are you doing out there in the world? I guess you could tell us maybe about your streams a little bit and where to find your streams, because I don't think either of you plugged your streams necessarily at the beginning. And if we can get shout outs in chat for them so the links can be followed easily.
Sure. I'll go first again. My name is JessyQuil. I'm a relative veteran on Twitch, to the point where people have for years thought I've been partnered, and I have never made that a priority or a goal, because I take this very casually and sporadically. It's a hobby of mine. I like speaking about psychology and self-care and mental health on my casts. I also do a lot of different charity broadcasts. Last month, I raised over $670-ish in 2 weeks for St. Jude. And currently, I am fundraising for Human Rights Campaign for Pride Month. I'm also working towards assisting the Movember Foundation, which focuses on mental health and physical health awareness and advocacy for men, because that is a sometimes forgotten group of people where there's like toxic masculinity, where they don't go to the doctor because they don't feel like they need to, and then they unfortunately suffer a heart attack and so on, and kind of giving awareness to that. I have a huge helper personality. I like assisting people with getting to their goals. So that's how I started on Twitch. I was a moderator and a community manager for a lot of people who eventually either became partnered on Twitch or grew their communities 3 to 5 times more during my tenure as a community manager for them. And help them figure out new different types of content that they can add to their Twitch channel or jumpstart their YouTube channels and so on. And on my broadcasts themselves, when they happen 2-ish times a week is the average, I like just advocating awareness for mental health and realizing that everyone kind of goes through difficult times, and sometimes they are much more difficult and much longer than they need to be. And finding the right professional help or talk therapy or peer support, or removing yourself from toxicity, either in an environment, a workplace, or from friends and family who are triggering you, explaining that those are all various options that people have. I am JessyQuil everywhere that matters. Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, JessyQuil.tv. You can read much more about me. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Jesse. It's been really refreshing to have you here, and like I said, I think you've set a really great tone and have a lot more knowledge than I do. So I'm gonna have to steal some facts from you at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to dish with you.
Please, Katie, you're up. Where can people find you? What do you do?
So as I mentioned before, I'm a very casual variety streamer. My schedule varies, usually week per week or week to week, because I do have a day job that I frame my streaming schedule around. So some weeks may feel a bit more consistent than others regarding my schedule, but that's only because I like having lights in my apartment and, like having food in my pantry to eat and stuff.
Luxuries.
Yeah. But other than that, I am really starting to try to get into more charity streams. We recently raised $300 for St. Jude Play Live last month, and in doing that, my community got to vote on which color my hair is going to be next, and they decided on the color blue, which will be happening very, very soon. And then other than that, like I said, I like to play a lot of Overwatch. It's kind of my thing. I also am really big into heavy story heavy games, and as well as indie games. I really, really enjoy smaller indie games that I find on Steam. The game that we just recently finished, that for some reason I waited 5 years to play, was Life is Strange, and that was
Great
incredible. I never thought I'd cry on stream.
I know
and
you
it
were
happened.
a professional crier for a good portion
Oh
of
my
time, it seemed
God.
like.
It was so rough. But other than that, my stream focuses on, positivity and community, and we're always there to be, a safe place for people to hang out, regardless of who you are or who you love or anything like that. And you can find me on Twitter and Twitch, just at KaitiePlays, or twitch.tv/KaitiePlays. Instagram is Kaitie_plays, since somebody stole that from me. That's about it.
It's worth noting to spell Katie is Kaitie. Because,
Yeah.
man, I tried finding you real hard for a bit. I was like, what is happening?
That was my dad's doing.
Yeah, well, my name doesn't, I'm there with you.
You can relate.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I guess just to kind of slowly end things out here. For those of you that are wondering, I actually really like giving more time to Jesse and to her, like the co-host, if you will, to talk. 'Cause, God, I talk enough on this channel. But if you guys didn't know, this is my channel. My name's Goop. A lot of people call me Goop or Go-Op. My real name's Dylan, Dyllon. Yeah, that's a mess. And this was episode 1 of the Less Than 3 podcast. This is a podcast, of course, focusing on gaming, streaming, and of course, mental health. On my channel, we play a lot of Warframe. If you haven't seen it before, we play Warframe most nights, a little Destiny. We love Persona, so if you like Persona, you're in good company. I have an unhealthy addiction. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and streaming is my full-time job. So that's kind of what we're about here, if you haven't been here before. So welcome, everybody. Thank you to everybody who popped up in chat. This actually had a really good turnout, and we had a lot of phenomenal questions. Anybody who hopped into the waiting room, I appreciate that. This is a bi-weekly podcast, and if you guys didn't know, that you can support the show by obviously subscribing to the channel, throwing bits, but you can also head on over to patreon.com/cooperatives, where for only $1 you can get access to the audio and video version of the episode early before it goes live on youtube.com and podcast services around the globe the following week. So this will be syndicated out. This will go live tomorrow on Patreon, and then you guys will be able to find it there until the following week, where we'll do the next episode. And so I want to thank our phenomenal guests for setting a great precedent for diving in and dealing with me, right, as I put this haphazardly together for the last it was like, I think yesterday I got everybody rubrics and everything. It's been crazy, but
You did great.
I appreciate
fun.
it. It's been my anxiety was like, nah, man, you can push it back. It's fine. Don't worry about it right now. And so I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, everybody in chat. We're going to move to the intro screen, where we'll play some music here in a bit as we get ready to just continue streaming some Warframe for the next few hours. So I will see you guys hopefully later on the channel, and hopefully in on the next episode.